Hi, I am Hannah, and today I would like to talk about a movie that I saw and the series of thoughts that came up from watching the movie and looking more into the movie, and how I believe this actually relates to kind of cultural misconceptions on masculinity and femininity, but also tuned me into a bigger truth on those two principles and manifesting. So the movie in question was The Big Lebowski, and I watched it for the first time a couple days ago, and it's a great movie. And I didn't know really much about it. I knew about the dude, I knew about bowling. That was pretty much about as much as I knew. I knew it was a cult classic, but I really didn't know anything about it. And so the movie has all these surrealist elements that I wasn't expecting. And it's entertaining and it's funny, and I see the reason why the main character, the dude, has this following is because of his ability to be in all these different circumstances and flow through them more or less in a dignified way, or at least in a way that is in line with his belief system. And I think that there is something compelling about watching an individual go through trying external circumstances and see how they respond to it. It tells you something about their character, it tells you something about their philosophy, and for the character that the dude is, it was interesting, it was compelling, and it was philosophic. And so anyways, watching a surrealist movie, there's plenty of places in which you can interpret things, and things are left unanswered. And so I looked up some analyses on YouTube, and I found this one, and his main thesis was that the Big Lebowski was a postmodern reflection on masculinity and the current state of manhood, and how manhood has degraded in a lot of these ways. And he showed that by looking at each of the male characters and showing how they try to be masculine, but they don't really quite hit the mark in the kind of traditional ways that we think of masculinity. And then he compares it to the women in the movie, showing that the women are all empowered in some kind of way, or seem to not be reliant on the men, that they actually just kind of do their own thing, and that in many ways the women use the men, so the women are the ones in control. And seeing something like that it was really interesting, because it brought up multiple things for me, in that it really reminded me of high school when we were reading modern literature. So we were reading Steinbeck, and I believe my teacher at the time was talking about how that era was the lost generation, and how that time inspired a lot of conversations about what does it mean to be a man, and how a lot of the literature at that time was also about masculinity and being a man and defining what a man is. And so, the lost generation, that was the early 20th century, and yet here we are at the end of the 20th century. The Big Lebowski was made in 1998. The story takes place in the early 90s, and yet we're having the same conversation about, okay, what is a man, right? And so even though the YouTuber made a compelling case about this being a movie about manhood, and or a reflection on manhood, my my response to that was just really that I don't know if it's actually that it's unique to the time, like this question of manhood. I think that in certain ways it takes on the characteristics of the time, but I don't actually think this questioning of masculinity and the purpose of masculinity and the purpose of good manhood and what is good manhood is new. I think what is different is that we actually have more ability to make stories and share and disseminate stories more than we have at any other time. And so, now, today, in 2024, you can go on your phone and you can talk to people on your Instagram, TikTok, you can talk to all kinds of people, and you can talk about your personal experience and say, hey, this reflects this nature of reality, because truly it is your experience, right? And so we have the ability now to see so many different experiences of reality. And so we actually have more nuance, right? We have more kind of like color and flavor because we can see more of the details, right? And so my critique of the movie analysis is just that even though I can see his point, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, my critique is that I don't think that this question of masculinity and what manhood is limited to postmodernism or to this movie. I think that these are actually questions that have happened all throughout human history, and they just continue to evolve with the external conditions as they evolve. And I think that it's an ever ongoing question on an individual to a group basis that is always happening. And I think that these questions on what is masculinity and femininity are really powerful because at their root, femininity and masculinity are the creative forces of the universe. And so to contemplate on this is truly to contemplate on creation and the foundations of why any of us are here, why any of this exists. And, that can take on a literal meaning, and it takes on a very philosophical, spiritual meaning as well. So that's my critique there, that analysis is not limited to that time frame, and that I don't think men question their masculinity any more or less. They probably are doing it at the same time. Now, do I agree that the times are different and that the material conditions are different, and that there are differences? 100%. I totally acknowledge that the time is different and the conditions are different, and they're living in a different world and a different time than previous human generations. Totally. And that's kind of like the power of astrology, as astrology acknowledges, hey, there's this certain core essence, these core patterns. And the idea of astrology is that you see it change over time. You see, like the universe, the structure of the universe is that it's this inverted cone that is always expanding out. And as there's more expansion in time, more time and matter, there's also more chaos. And so part of what we're experiencing as we get older is we actually witness the ways in which, through the expansion of time and space, the ways in which the world gets more chaotic. That's like a physics principle about the growth of the universe. And I think astrology is useful in that it identifies, just like in math says, hey, here's these foundations that this is like our approximate language for seeing these patterns, and so we're going to use these placeholders, these variables, these formulas, and that's kind of what astrology does too. And astrology is predictive, and what makes something predictive? Well, well, the quality of a prediction is really based on the amount of data that you have. And so with astrology is you have this system that has developed over thousands of years, that has developed on its own in various different cultures and parts of the world. Why? Because people are connected to their environment. Everyone can see the sky. Everyone experiences seasons and the changing of time. And so it's really interesting that this pattern recognition on a kind of spiritual cosmic level has independently developed in all these different cultures. So anyways, I'm not totally sure why I just jumped to that. Sorry. I'll do my best to tone in on my notes. So anyways, in the movie we see the I think I was bringing up the astrology thing because I'm just saying, like, we see these patterns, these kind of essential patterns, but they have different configurations over time. And so I would just say that the masculinity question, what is masculinity, is just a similar thing, in which it's the same patterns, but it's just a different configuration. And another thing that was occurring in there is that, or the film analysis was, he was saying, hey, here's all these inadequate men, and here are the women in juxtaposition who are controlling the men, and they're actually doing better than the men, and they actually seem more like they know what's going on. And I think even this is part of the mythos of femininity and female, because at its core, femininity is that which is unknown. It is mysterious. It is the unmanifest. And so in many ways, the female projection, the idea of femininity, is that which cannot be held or known. And this is actually a very similar theme all across human history too. I mean, how many stories have you heard about muses and magical women and women who had the ability to sway a kingdom and armies just from her kind of suggestibility? And how many stories do you know in which the woman, whether she's a princess or an empress or whatever, has this kind of magical ability, or excuse me, she is like the prize, right? She is the purpose of the quest and the fighting and all of this stuff. She is the reason in which they're willing to endeavor and develop themselves in so many ways. And I'm reading this really fascinating book. This is The Tantric Yoga and the Wisdom Goddesses by David Frawley. And he actually, I think, answers why the pursuit of female femininity, or in this case the goddess, is such a contemplated thing, and why the movie might frame femininity and femaleness in this kind of superior, more powerful, more knowing, more in control way. Is that, one, I think that this is a kind of time, across time understanding of femininity. And I think if you took like a relationship counselor, if a relationship counselor was in the room right now and they heard that, like, oh, a lot of men have a projection of women maybe having something that is more magical or more knowing than them, or there's something etheric about them, that can still exist. And a relationship counselor in the room is going to say, hey, I don't want you to forget she is a human. And I feel like that's been one of the big things to remind people is, hey, she's a human, which means like she has insecurities, she has flaws, she has doubts, she makes mistakes. There are ways in which she is immature and she's growing. She is a human, and a human is someone who isn't perfect and makes mistakes. And so part of the male projection on femininity is this goddess, she's perfect, she's gonna take care of me, she is all my dreams, all this kind of stuff. And so a relationship counselor would say, hey, if you want to actually have a good relationship with a woman, one of the really important things is you're gonna need to know that, one, she's a human, and two, you're a human. And so like relationship health, man to female, the first thing you're going to have to do is learn how to be emotionally regulated and to know what your weaknesses are in a relationship, and to be open to her weaknesses, and to know what is a deal breaker or not for you. Like, there might be certain things that if you knew someone acted in that way when they're stressed or in conflict, that might be a deal breaker for you. And that kind of level of self-inquiry and knowledge about relationships, I think is important for a healthy, romantic, spiritual connection. So a relationship counselor would kind of give all that disclaimer, right? Okay, and I agree with that, and I think that's super important. And I don't think that men are wrong to project this idea of dreamy, etheric quality to women, because I think that they are picking up on the power of femininity. And I think this power of femininity is only something that many women in a more kind of mainstream way are picking up to. And it's not limited to their sexuality. It's not limited to what their bodies elicit or suggest. It's actually that female power is different and just as powerful as male power. And so in the book by Mina Irfan, who I've quoted on here in different videos, she wrote a book called Lady Balls, and this is what her book is about. And it was really cool for me to read, because I was like, wow, she just said it so well. And so she says, hey, female power is internal, and male power is all about the external. So the penis and the balls, those are external. So those are like external displays of power, and very much masculinity is about what can you do, what can you produce, what can, strength, what can I move. It's all about these external ways to show power, right? And female power is just fundamentally different. And this is why it's called lady balls, is because our balls, right, the area in which we have our eggs, is internal. And so our power is not about what we can outwardly display and show, even though, yes, we are very physical. We have our physical appearance, which has its own value. Our kind of equivalent power to male power is this internal female power. And that internal female power has everything to do with emotions and energy work, okay? And so women biologically are more attuned to emotions because of estrogen. That's just biological. And it's even how our brains are developed too. Women are more relational. They think in more emotional and relationship ways. And so that's where you see like the right brain, left brain kind of thing, in which men are considered to think more linearly. Women are considered to think more like in cycles and circles. And, you can see that in terms of how, like, our bodies are responsive in these cyclical ways, all this kind of stuff. So anyways, what is this whole female power thing? Okay, well, this female power is very much about this emotional state that she can elicit. And also, I think something that the movie even alludes to, The Big Lebowski, is that these women that you see on the screen, they get what they want. Okay, they want it, they got it, right? And that is very powerful. Not only that, but they have high self-esteem. So it means that they see themselves as being capable. They see themselves as being influential. They see themselves as being deserving of what they want. They see themselves as creative and powerful. And so when any person has high self-esteem, they become a creative force. And so I think the juxtaposition between the men and the women in the movie is that I think in certain ways you have these women who have high self-esteem, right? I don't think it necessarily has to mean that this is inherently all women are like this, because the truth is not all women have high self-esteem. In fact, In fact, low self-esteem, people pick up on it. It is less attractive, and a lot of people struggle with being attractive and finding themselves attractive. Has to do with self-esteem, and the way you develop self-esteem is by doing and completing things that you want to do. That actually builds your self-esteem, is like doing things that you want to do. So it requires you, one, to identify what do you want, right? And then two, it requires the kind of willpower and ability to follow through with it and be consistent and show up to it. So those things alone build your self-esteem. So male to female, that's going to build your self-esteem. That's going to make you more attractive. So, anyways, like I'm saying, the media shows these kind of stories in which we're questioning masculinity, or they'll do the opposite, in which they're questioning femininity. And they do it in this way in which they will show a weakened version of the masculine or the feminine. And I would just really say that this is like a more immature version, or a less developed version, or one who has a lower self-esteem. And I think that there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay to have low self-esteem. It's okay to be insecure, because like I said, that's part of the human experience. We're creatures of this earth. We're earthly. We are of this plane. And the earthly plane has suffering. The earthly plane has pain. And yet we are also spiritual, and we're cosmic, and we have spiritual abilities. We feel energy. We feel emotion. We're intuitive. So, we have the ability to do things on this plane, and we also have the ability to feel things and have higher knowledge and wisdom and all this kind of stuff. And I would say that the real issue, more than this idea of what is manhood, like the analysis, video was talking about, is the disconnection and the separateness between man and female. Because really at its core, what male and female represent is these two really important forms of creation. And so masculine is going to be more in the mental and the mind, and then feminine is more in the emotional and etheric. And so, and imaginative and intuitive. And so what we're seeing is, I think, more than just a literal thing of what is man. It's like, it's a desire to have harmony between masculine and feminine. And in a certain way, the movie shows that without that healthy balance, without both knowing the other, people are stilted, or they seem to not realize their best potential, or they have these bad patterns, right? And so it's okay to go there. Like I was saying, it's okay to be immature. It's okay to make mistakes. I'm not saying that everyone around you is gonna like say that's okay. I'm just saying that it's allowed to exist. You're allowed to have that experience. It exists. It can be there, right? It doesn't mean you're bad or wrong for it existing. And it actually doesn't even mean that these characters are bad or wrong, or that, it points to the inherent degradation of civilization because these men were presented in this way. I don't think so. Because I believe once you do heal the masculine and the feminine is very healing. How do we heal? How do humans heal the best? Humans actually heal the best when they feel that someone is listening to their pain and feeling their pain with them. That actually is one of the best ways. Why? Because the nervous system is being told, hey, you're safe, and you are safe to start repairing myself, and I'm gonna stop being in this heightened cortisol state, and I can actually rest. And that rest, sleep, is where we actually have our most growth hormone. That's where we repair our body the most. And so feminine energy is very healing in that way. And so I think anyone has the possibility to heal. I don't think that anyone is doomed to where they're at. And I think that's even what a lot of like Christianity and the Abrahamic religions are all about, is this emphasis on you're allowed to be forgiven. You're allowed to make mistakes and be embraced by God, etheric. And I think the ways in which there's confusion with those religions is that God is only presented as this masculine force, but you know, as a book like this shows, there's not just God, there's also goddess, and that is important to acknowledge as well, because you have to acknowledge all these pieces that exist for creation. So at its core, whether it's female or male, you have to develop yourself. And to even posit that the women in this movie are like somehow better, it's like they're not. Like Bunny is really immature, you know, and the fact that she would run away from her home and put herself in a situation in which she's pretty much being sex trafficked. She's in porn movies and she owes a lot of money and she's married to this older man. Like, that's not healthy. That is a girl who is not doing well. That's not her, you know, living it up. Even though you might see the scenes in which she's happy and she's boisterous and, you know, even kind of like aggressively suggestive, you don't see the scenes in which she's questioning herself. She has low self-esteem. You know, you just get to see the parts in which it looks like she has all this power. But the fact that someone would do that to themselves is not healthy. No one, like, to sex traffic yourself and run away from family, there's got to be something really amiss. And then similarly with Maud, like, that is certainly not healthy to, you know, go into someone's house and attack them and then steal a rug. You know, it's not healthy. She trespasses in Lebowski's space often, and even unconsensually, she uses him to get pregnant. So there's a lot of ways in which she's manipulative and immature. And I wouldn't say like, oh wow, these are women who are such great examples of good femininity. You know, like, the women are just as corrupted and kind of out of balance as the male depictions are. But doesn't mean that, oh, these people are always going to be like this. It does not. It doesn't mean that. It means that there's some kind of imbalance. And like this book says, the actual purpose of sex and sexual imagery, at least in a spiritual sense, is not just for these everyday indulgences, is to just be like, oh yeah, that's what we are, is we're just super sexual all the time. David Fraley has this great quote where he says, in this book, on page 54, he says, "Sexual portrayal is an attempt to portray the higher unity of the cosmic masculine and feminine forces, which is what we are really seeking through sexuality." And I just thought that was so beautiful, because what he's saying is that anytime we have these big themes around sex and all this, what we're actually trying to get to on a higher conscious level is unity. And harmony between feminine and masculine, which are these creative forces. And he goes further to say that the sexual portrayal shows the eternal embrace of the divine masculine and feminine powers, which is all that we are truly seeking in life. So we want to see this healthy masculine and feminine powers both have their own powers to be together, to be whole, to be one. And so more than this being an analysis about the men are weak and the women have more power, it's about, hey, how do we actually build harmony between the two? How do they actually get to experience that? Because that is actually what they want, is they want harmony. And even at a feeling state level, what we want at the end of the day, we want happiness, we want love, we want peace, we want safety. And between male and female, that's also occurring, but we might on an external level be experiencing it differently just because of our biology and our socio-gender differences. But when you see the unity and you see that, hey, man to female can be insecure and immature, right? There can be more compassion for those differences and struggles, and realize, oh, we are really similar. We're actually trying to be unified with ourselves. We're trying to be whole. We're trying to get into alignment. And I think the reason the dude is a compelling character is because he's someone who, he's not necessarily just trying to replay the kind of maybe toxic masculine roles. He's actually he's actually a little more in touch with his feminine, in that he's willing to let other people have opinions. He's willing to let go of things. He's willing to feel empathy. You know, he's willing to see different sides. And that kind of, you seeing someone who has kind of more male and female in them, more that balance, it's really attractive to us, because that's what everyone seeks for themselves. And is dude perfect? No, he's not perfect. You know, he's an alcoholic. In many ways, there are ways in which he's not doing well for himself. Like, you know, you can make all those arguments, and yet here is someone who is able to enjoy their life. And that's actually a really rare attribute for someone who enjoys their life. And I think that's even why he's compelling, is it's like, okay, he's not a perfect man, you know, he's not this millionaire or whatever, and yet he has ways, he enjoys his life. And that's kind of what we all want. And that harmony occurs when you have that inner harmony, or excuse me, balance. Maybe I'm just saying the same thing in different words. All right, so I'm going to conclude this shortly. I would just say with the masculine and the feminine, once more, is like, again, this emphasis on we're more mental than we are spiritual. And this is where we're seeing the healing with the feminine, is we're learning to embrace spirit more. We're learning to embrace our intuition and imagination more, and not villainize it so much and have so much antagonism about that. And I think this kind of really big existentialism we see between men are different, women are different, we're so angry at each other. I think it's a little bit of false anxiety, which is this idea that false anxiety is when you're kind of doing basic things wrong, and so you're feeling anxiety. So, for example, if I don't eat food, my body's gonna feel anxious just because my blood sugar will drop, and then I continue to not eat food when I feel hungry. That's gonna make me anxious, okay? My body's just gonna have feeling. If I continue to do that in a chronic way, in which every time I'm hungry, I don't eat or I drink coffee, right? I just don't listen to my body's signals. I don't listen to my body's needs and desires. My body is going to sound the alarm and be like, hey, something's really off, right? And I think a lot of people take that anxiety feeling and they're like, oh my God, this is more mental and existential. And it's like, actually, it's like false anxiety. It's like, if you look at your basic biomechanics, like, are you taking care of the car? You know, a lot of people would feel 10 times better in their life if they just were on the computer less, they had better sleep, they ate enough food, they ate food when they're hungry, they had social interaction. These just really basic biometric things. And I'm not saying we live in a system that's perfect and that facilitates that for everybody. So I can understand how that can be a deeper conversation, but that's why it's called false anxieties, because it's like, it's not actually existential. And more like real anxiety is this thing where it's like, you feel this bigger discomfort, like maybe you're in a relationship and you're like, oh, I'm just chronically anxious about this. And it's like, oh, it's actually not a good relationship for you to be in. And that's kind of like a bigger, more real anxiety, because you actually have to change this relationship, and it changes your identity and all this kind of stuff, right? And so I kind of feel like this imbalance between male and female is a little bit of this false anxiety in which it's like, hey, like, you just kind of need to rest more, or you need to be more in touch with your feeling state, or maybe you need to be more in touch with your masculine state of having structure and order and all those kinds of things. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what I mean by that. And so this is why I really like manifesting and spirituality, is because it's one of the few areas that really is the study of masculine and feminine. It is the study of these really foundational forces that is so powerful to us and makes such a big influence in our life. And so I feel like I've learned so much about being female and my femininity because of studying manifestation. I think that's probably very true for men as well. And what's cool about manifestation is that, you know, it teaches you about the way, which is this kind of way of the middle way, right? It's not about going to these extremities or trying to control everything. I mean, it does teach you about both your material power and your spiritual power. And I really think that brings so much more joy to life, because you're not limited to one scope of operating, and you're getting a clearer picture on kind of like your full power, and that's important. And that's also the power of astrology. And I think when people feel imbalanced in terms of being more masculine or feminine, or even if you have this mentality of I'm kind of more mad at men, or I'm more mad at women, or you know, something like this, it actually probably points to some imbalance in your chart, in which maybe you're feeding too much into one side. And so being able to remedy that on both a physical level and then an emotional, spiritual, mental level can be really powerful. I do offer astrology chart readings, and so my email is in the description. And so if you're someone who you've been resonating with this and you've had these kind of existential questions or themes come up in your life around masculinity, femininity, and you do feel like there's any kind of imbalance, I really do recommend a chart reading, because it does show masculine and feminine energies and how they're playing out. And what's so cool is that it shows you how to remedy it. This is why astrology is just really powerful, because it acknowledges what's there and it will show you how to heal it. So anyways, if that speaks to you, email me and we can talk and see, figure out a time to do that, and I will give you my rates over there. So to wrap this up, I want to close this with a quote from here, because this book is about the goddess, right? These different goddesses. And he says the wisdom goddesses. And this is a part of femininity that I think is being opened up more in the mainstream. And let me just read this. So he says the goddess as knowledge. And this is page 59. In Tantra, as in many spiritual traditions, the feminine aspect of divine reality represents knowledge or wisdom. And the Greek idea of the three graces is similar. So the three wisdoms are feminine. The true worship of the goddess involves knowledge, which is her real form. It is not merely an outer worship, but an inner worship, which is meditation. Meditation on the goddess is a form of self-inquiry or a means of acquiring knowledge. It is not merely an adulation of feminine forms or qualities. It may start with the image of the goddess, but reaches far beyond the limits of name, form, and personality to the impersonal absolute. The goddess represents what is hidden, secret, subtle, and sensitive. What has to be searched out and discovered. As the word, she represents the teaching and its comprehension. She is thus the inner guiding power. The goddess represents what is to be known, what we are drawn by an inner fascination to discover. She is the mystery and allure of the higher knowledge, which causes us to lose interest in what the mind can know, the familiar realm of the senses. The goddess takes us beyond the realm of the known and the domain of time-space into the secrets of eternity-finity. In the process of spiritual learning, the goddess becomes the muse who guides and inspires us. She is the high priestess who unfolds the inner truths. And so, and this last one. Yet true knowledge as part of an integral comprehension of reality is always related to energy and beauty. I love that. So what I took away from that is that to learn about femininity, to study not just God, but also goddess, feminine energy, is to love wisdom, is to learn higher learning, is to learn outer and inner wisdom. And it's also to connect to desire. And by connecting to femininity, you connect to your muse. You are excited about life. You're energized about life. And she'll take you to the secrets of the unknown. She'll take you to places you can't even imagine. So very much how men can project this ethereal quality to women, the goddess and the feminine energy very much embodies that, because in this process of spiritual learning, she is the muse who guides and inspires us. And where does she unfold truth? Well, her whole thing is that truth is based on energy and beauty. And I think contemplations on those two things, energy and beauty, really does give us so much more meaning into life. So this is where I'm going to end this video. This is much longer than I normally do it. And I'm quite delighted that a movie as funny and comedic as The Big Lebowski could bring about conversations, and that I could connect it to something like this. So shout out to all the people, in which got ideas from or built ideas off of, that I've referenced in this video. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more. I'll see you next time. Peace.